This was not meant to be my second video. After getting some great feedback from my first video about how meditation helped me with my social anxiety, I was pumped. I was ready to make more videos about mindset, philosophy, and meditation. I was going to go out into the beautiful city of Sydney, Australia, and get artistic shots from my favorite places around the city. I was going to have freshly cut hair. Everything was going to be polished down to a T. And then once again, COVID came along and ruined everything. After having a pretty normal year compared to the rest of the world, Sydney was once again thrown into lockdown with millions of residents being forced to stay at home. But like a lot of things that seemed really bad at the time, there was a lot of important lessons that came out of this lockdown for me. About 3 months ago, at the beginning of lockdown, I had to go see the doctor for unrelated reasons. And as we're wrapping up, he asked me, "How is your mental health doing with the lockdown?" And I said, "As good as can be, I guess." And so he prints out a piece of paper and he hands it to me and he asks me to fill it out. And at the top of the piece of paper, it says K10 test. And this is a test meant to measure your psychological distress. So there's a series of questions that you're meant to answer based on your mood for the past 30 days. And there's some very specific questions like, how often have you felt tired for no reason? How often have you felt like everything is hopeless? How often have you felt like everything is an effort? And you have to answer these questions on a scale from 1 to 5, with 1 being none of the time and 5 being all of the time. So I answer the questions on the survey, and I hand the survey back to the doctor, and he starts tallying the scores. And then he says, "Well, numbers don't really mean everything on these things, but according to this, you are extremely depressed." Now, this came as a total shock to me. I never would have considered myself depressed because I can always see the big picture. I know my life is great. I have beautiful friends, and I live in a beautiful city. But the truth is, I have been struggling with energy and motivation for a while. Rather than doing the things I know I should be doing, I just feel like lying in bed all day and scrolling on my phone. So the doctor asked me if I had any more appointments with my therapist, and I said yes, and he said, "Okay, good." And I said, "Before I go, I noticed from that test that I've been struggling with energy and motivation for quite a while now. Do you think it's possible that I just have trouble focusing, and maybe I have something like ADD?" And he said, "No, to be honest, I think you're just simply depressed. It makes sense. We're in lockdown. You're living on your own. Your source of income is in question. You have a lot of reasons to be depressed." And as he was saying it, he kind of realized how morbid that sounded as it was coming out of his mouth, and we both shared an awkward laugh. And he said, "If you'd like, we could try medication." And I said, "Let's do it." So, for the first time ever, I started taking 5 milligrams a day of escitalopram, also known as Lexapro or Cipralex. And in just 5 days, I woke up on a Saturday morning. I stepped into my living room. The sun was shining in through the big windows, and I felt happier than I had felt in years. It was actually a feeling of nostalgia, like when you hear a song or you smell something that reminds you of your childhood, except it was my mood. The effect of the antidepressants were so profound that I actually felt like an idiot for having struggled for so long. I'd spent all this time studying meditation and spirituality in order to master my mind. And then suddenly I just take a tiny bit of this pill and it feels like there's barely a problem to deal with in the first place. To be honest, I actually felt like an idiot for starting this video series. I thought that my last video would simply say, "Go pop this pill and enjoy your life." But as a wise friend pointed out to me, the work that I had already done likely paved the way for this quick transformation. I'd already worked through past issues with a therapist. I'd already learned to calm my mind and observe my thoughts and emotions with 3 years of meditation. But what was the most fascinating about all of this was that I had the exact same set of circumstances that I did in my life the week before. I still had lots of work to do. I still had difficult people in my life I had to deal with. I was still stuck at home in lockdown, unable to see my friends. But the difference is, prior to the antidepressants, any one of these things would have made me feel sick to my stomach. I would have felt a shockwave of anxiety go through my entire body. And now, they were just tiny blips. Still there, but manageable. The change I felt is a lot like the difference between going through your day on 4 hours of sleep versus 8 hours of sleep. When you've barely slept, everything feels like a struggle. You're impatient with others, you're highly sensitive, and the tiniest of comments can set you off. Nobody would tell you to see a therapist in this case. They'd just tell you to go to bed. With a full night's rest, the exact same set of challenges are no big deal. And that's exactly what taking the antidepressants has felt like. I'm more energized, motivated, and capable of taking on the everyday challenges of life. Now, antidepressants don't solve everything. There's a number of side effects you could have. For example, it was causing me to have brain fog, meaning I had a harder time thinking and concentrating. It was also crushing my libido, and it's often used as a prescription for premature ejaculation. So, depending on where you stand in that department, it can either be a help or a hindrance. So then I switched over to Brintalex, also known as vortioxetine. And I still had a tiny bit of brain fog in the first month while my brain adjusted to the medication, but since then I've had no side effects whatsoever. There's a bunch of different antidepressants out there, and we all react to them differently. So you might need to try a few different ones before you get all of the effects that you do want with none of the effects that you don't. So don't give up right away. You also have to be careful about coming off of them. You could go into relapse or withdrawal if you decrease the dosage too quickly. But most importantly, antidepressants won't solve any of the underlying issues in your mindset or your life. It won't help you develop relationship skills, or problem-solving skills, or coping skills. It won't help you overcome past traumas or build promising futures. So the vast majority of us still have work to do. And even though the medication is helping, I'm still constantly reading and learning and asking myself, what can I do to improve my mind? On the other hand, it can be so hard to take the steps we know we should be taking to improve our mental health if we're swimming in depression. Maybe you know you should be seeing a therapist, or improving your diet, or getting more exercise, but you just don't feel like it. If you feel like life is pointless, and you don't feel like seeing your friends, and you don't feel like taking the steps you know you need to take to improve your life, those are symptoms of depression. And if taking medication is the first step that will set off a domino effect of improvements to your life, you should absolutely do it, because there is nothing to prove by struggling without them. Finally, I want to talk about our attitude towards drugs and mental health. I know a lot of people who think that meditation is just a load of crap. It's a bunch of spiritual nonsense. It's just a breathing exercise. It doesn't do anything. And then I know other people that don't want to take antidepressants because they're not natural. If I have to take antidepressants, there must be something wrong with me. I want to do things naturally. If I take antidepressants, how do I know who the real me is? And these attitudes only get stronger the more that we build identities around them. I'm a scientific, rational person, so I'll never try meditation. I'm a spiritual, natural person, so I would never put antidepressants in my body. And suddenly, the mental health landscape begins to look like two opposing sides. So who's right and who's wrong? Well, the truth is, there is no truth. These are all just attitudes in the mind, and you have the power to choose, but more importantly, change the mindset that you want based on your desired outcomes. I often think of these decisions as forks in the road, where one path is to stay the same, and the other is to try something new. Staying the same has a 0% chance of improvement. You've been down that road before. You know how it goes. Nothing changes. The other path has a more than 0% chance of improvement. It could even only be 1%. Maybe antidepressants and meditation won't do anything for you, but the only chance you have of improvement is trying something new. You may have all the reasons in the world not to try meditation or antidepressants, and that is fine. That is your decision. But you have to be aware that it is a conscious decision to stay in one place and do things the way you've always done them. And it's hard for things to improve when you're still in one place. So for me, I don't choose to identify as scientific or spiritual. I choose to be mindful. Mindful of how my biases and identities could be getting in the way of major improvements to my life. Mindful of when my ego is getting in the way of saying, maybe I was wrong about that. Maybe I should try that after all. And the best way that I know how to improve my mindfulness is meditation. The more we get in tune with how our mindsets, egos, and opinions are holding us back, the less tightly we can hold on to them, and the more freedom we can have to choose from any school of thought. And ultimately, that's what this channel is about. Your entire reality is shaped by your mind, and you have the power to choose the mindsets that help you live a life that is richer, happier, more full of joy, and more free from suffering. So with that in mind, I hope this video has inspired some of you to try something new, because the only metric that matters is whether you're living your life in the way that you want to be living it. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you next time on The Conscious Experience.